My name is Miranda, and I'm 34 years old. I live alone these days. Not too long ago, I was living with my husband Jeff in a typical two-story apartment. We led a quiet life together, mostly to save cash. However, the life I had dreamed of and the reality of marriage were starkly different. I met Jeff at a social event where he let slip that he worked for a big company. Quite a few other ladies at the event seemed drawn to him, but we hit it off the best, mostly because we both loved outdoor activities. So after the event, I ended up hanging out with him several times, and a month later, he asked me out on a date. We were both 26 then. After dating for 3 years, he popped the question. It's been 5 years since we got hitched, and now I'm back to living alone. I feel like these 5 years have been squandered. The first year of our marriage was fairly uneventful. I did sense that my in-laws weren't exactly thrilled with me as their daughter-in-law, but I didn't let it bother me much, since our interactions were minimal. However, a year into our marriage, he abruptly quit his job.
Well, I wasn't getting along with my boss anymore, so I decided to quit. I wrote so much bad stuff about him in my resignation letter that there is no going back.
He told me nonchalantly. Before tying the knot, my in-laws had expressed their disapproval of a woman working, so I had quit my job. But with this sudden twist, we found ourselves both out of work. We couldn't sustain our lifestyle like this. Yes, he just brushed it off saying,
I will chill out for a bit.
And didn't even bother to hunt for a new job. He would just lounge around all day, claiming he's visited the job center, and even occasionally ask me for some spending cash. Previously, he worked and I was a homemaker, so I didn't have any extra money to give him. But he didn't seem to get the situation and refused to job hunt. So I decided to rejoin the workforce. Luckily, my coworkers didn't harbor any negative feelings about my return. They were actually pretty welcoming. The ones who were unhappy about my return to work were Jeff's folks. They had expressed their disdain for working women when we married, so I wasn't surprised they would object to me working now. So I asked Jeff to break the news to his parents that I was working because he had quit his job. But he dismissed it saying,
Yeah, I will let them know eventually.
But he never did. Instead, he just told them I was back at work. They called me immediately, demanding I quit and calling it indecent. Annoyed, I told them to ask Jeff why I had to go back to work and ended the call. That turned out to be a mistake. Somehow, Jeff had told them that I went back to work because I wanted my own money. This only fueled their criticism of me. Naturally, I was livid at Jeff and confronted him about his lie. He just shrugged it off, saying,
Well, you know how my parents are about image, right? If I told them I quit, they might pass out. I want you to wait until I find another job and reassure them it's all good.
The prospect of tolerating my in-laws' snarky comments for an undetermined amount of time, just to maintain the pretense Jeff and his parents cared about, left me with a splitting headache. So I shrugged off Jeff's views and headed over to his folks to spill the beans about his job situation. They seemed skeptical, just taking my word for it. So I came prepared with an audio clip where he chats about quitting his job. Since I frequently asked him why he quit and when he planned to job hunt, scoring the recording was a piece of cake. Once they heard the evidence I gathered, they blanched. Yet, they didn't show any sign of apologizing to their daughter-in-law, whom they had looked down on and tossed snide comments at.
If you had backed up your husband like a good wife should, he wouldn't have quit his job out of the blue.
The father-in-law began laying into me without warning. His wife chimed in with a blame game, saying, Because of such a wife, and started weeping uncontrollably. Their yelling must have been loud because their other daughter, Sally, who was in another room, poked her head into the living room asking, What's up with everyone? This doesn't concern you, Sally. Please go back. She hastily tried to usher Sally out of the room, but I was still playing the voice recording, so she caught on quick. I've heard that Sally is a 28-year-old remote worker. She confided in me that she has a boyfriend, but begged me to keep it a secret because her folks or Jeff finding out would mean trouble. It seems she longed to work outside the house, but her parents' belief that women shouldn't work outside had her hands tied. The fact that she looks up to me, who has work experience outside the home, isn't lost on her parents either. They have been badmouthing me to her, trying to get her to dislike me for various reasons. But so far, no dice. Thanks to this, Sally, having heard the voice recording, gave her folks a mean glare, probably comparing me and them in her head. Are you two dissing Miranda again? You're all about keeping up appearances, but do you think it's honorable to gang up on her Jeff's wife? And it seems like he quit his job. Despite this, have you been ribbing Miranda for getting back to work recently? She had no choice but to work because he wasn't earning, and you guys were peeved about that? You two really don't think things through. If you're going to prop up Jeff, just because he's a guy, find him a job pronto. She railed at them. Faced with their own daughter's harsh words, they slumped and hung their heads right there. Sally left them in that state and came over to me. Miranda, I'm really sorry about my dimwit brother. I guess he's going to start mooching off your earnings. So when that time comes, don't think twice about cutting him loose, she said. I smiled back at her. That's the plan. I have zero intention of spending my life with a man who refuses to work. His parents, afraid it would be scandalous to be dumped by their daughter-in-law, were more insistent than I was on Jeff landing a job. They often hauled him off, who was idling around without visiting the job center, to scout for work. Thanks to that, he landed a gig at another company 6 months post quitting his job. He had been with a big company earlier, so he found employment, but he sneered at the company as a small fry that doesn't match my skills. Because of this, I had a hunch this job wouldn't last long either. My prediction was either spot on, or he lasted longer than I thought. But after 3 years, he said,
"This place wasn't a good fit after all,"
and bailed on the company. Maybe hanging in there for 3 years counts as a win. Even though he was back at work, I have been with one company for longer than he has. By then, through my dedicated service and commitment to my job, I had climbed the corporate ladder to a managerial position, and my salary had seen a bump. That's because I knew I couldn't bank on the careless Jeff anymore. And there was another thing. I needed cash to look into something that was bugging me. As a result of my investigation, I decided to take action. Hey, let's call it quits. My words made my husband's eyes pop. I don't think I can stick it out with you any longer. So let's get a divorce. He was a man with a peculiar air of self-assuredness, having always been cuddled by his parents and told that, as a man, he was destined for great things. So, when I brought up the topic of divorce, even while I was handing him the divorce papers, he smirked and said,
"Are you sure about ditching me? It's unthinkable that a woman like you would ever snag a man like me again."
I couldn't quite grasp his words, but I took the divorce papers and penned my name in the designated space. Despite this, he seemed to hold a belief that he was immune to divorce, asserting,
"If you are that obstinate, I will head back to my parents' house for a bit. Have fun sobbing your heart out in my absence,"
and hastily packed his stuff and headed home. This worked out in my favor. I submitted the divorce papers while he was gone, signed a lease for a new apartment, moved in, and kicked off my solo life. However, the place I'd moved into was designed for two. I had someone I had invited to share the place with me, so it was a temporary lone-wolf life until they moved in. 2 weeks after I began my solo life, I got a surprise call from Jeff.
"Hey, you must have done some soul searching by now, right? Besides, I pieced together that this whole divorce gig is just a ruse for a surprise. Let me into the apartment ASAP. My parents and the movers are all waiting downstairs.
Excuse me? I peeked down at the front of the apartment from the balcony on the 55th floor. People looked as tiny as ants, but I spotted the truck parked in front of the apartment. It was possibly the mover's truck he was in. I couldn't comprehend his words, so I replied, "What are you on about? I'm lost." Then he blurted out cheerfully,
From today, we are moving in, all 5 of us. Hence, the move. Don't keep my folks waiting.
I was baffled as to why he still believed we were married even after he'd signed the divorce papers. Suddenly, I heard his mother's voice on the other end of the line. It seems his parents had tagged along.
Miranda, looks like you're ranking in quite the dough while sidelining your husband, aren't you? That's why he can't make much money. You're the one draining his drive. It's inevitable. If you're the breadwinner, then you have no choice but to play the supporting role to a working wife.
It appeared that I was always belittled by them in my capacity as his wife. I sighed and let one thing out for her. "By the way, I'm single."
What?
"I divorced Jeff the other day. I told him I want to split, and he signed the divorce papers I handed him. So I filled in my part and filed it at the office. I had no plans to support a stranger." With that, I ended the call. Behind me, Sally, who was whipping up some cocoa, asked, "Was that my brother just now?" Yeah, it was Jeff and his mother. They seemed to have discovered that I moved into their apartment and came with the intent to freeload. They mentioned they were planning on a family of 5, so they probably counted you in as well. At my words, she grimaced. "Ooh, I'm sorry. It might be my fault. Maybe he spotted my phone or heard me speaking to the mover when I was relocating. Honestly, your family has no shred of decency when it comes to women. Actually, I'm sharing the place with Sally. I suggested room sharing to help her, who was unable to leave her house due to constant interference from her family. I chose this upscale apartment because I thought that even if relocated, her family would barge in if the security was lax. No matter how long they camp out in front of the apartment, they likely won't be able to get in. Her boyfriend is currently on a solo assignment overseas, so we were discussing room sharing for a few years. Even so, I was taken aback when they abruptly switched their stance on being financially dependent. I remarked, "Did my mom actually say that?" She cocked her head in confusion. Up until now, Sally's mother had always maintained that it was unseemly for women to work, constantly advising Sally to avoid venturing out for work as well. Despite this, I was perturbed when she suddenly flip-flopped on her opinion and announced she intended to live off her daughter-in-law. "Ah, come to think of it," Sally concurred as if the penny had dropped. "Maybe my dad finally confessed to my mom that he lost his job?" "What? Your dad is jobless?" "It appears he got sacked by his boss for blurting out sexist remarks like all female employees need to do is brew coffee, undermining their work, and dismissing their contribution merely because they were women." "Oh, wow. I thought he only harbored such traits at home." I sighed. Evidently, he was imposing his misogynistic views on others outside home as well. Now, neither of the 3, Jeff and his parents, are employed. As a result, they must be counting on Sally and me, who are gainfully employed. The fact that they snooped around her smartphone implies they must have discovered that I'm living with her. Regardless of what they presume, it seems like they concluded, if Sally is rooming with Miranda, we can band together too, and they stormed our flat. While we were discussing this, I had no option but to pick up the phone since Jeff wouldn't stop calling. "Hello?"
Stop this tomfoolery! Haven't you had a moment of introspection? I'm warning you. I'm coming back.
"Why would you let a stranger into my home? We were divorced, so could you stop meddling?"
Then why are you living with Sally? She's my sister.
She expressed her wish to disassociate from you guys. She said she left a note at your house.
That note is void. You remain my wife until I say I've had enough of you. And Sally is my sister. Got it?
Oh, this is such a hassle. Could you liaise with my attorney from now on? I plan to sue you for damages due to your infidelity in the future.
A lawyer? Infidelity? What on earth are you prattling about?
I sighed. He never questions why I wanted a divorce, but I chose to sever ties with him after uncovering his infidelity. He was fired from a blue chip firm and from the subsequent company he landed a job with, because he was making advances on a female newcomer at the farm. Both dismissals resulted from the infidelity occurring during office hours, and he appeared to have promptly split up with the woman he was seeing as soon as he was fired. The reason I was kept in the dark until now was because the companies didn't want to disclose this, fearing the story would leak. When he resigned for reasons I didn't approve of, I hired a private detective to dig up the truth and found it was due to infidelity. Jeff was rattled when his infidelity was exposed, but swiftly resorted to blaming the victim, professing things like,
It's the fault of the one who gets cheated on. Infidelity is a mark of a man's honor.
So I calmly resorted, There's no honor in a man who's broke, and ended the call. In the end, they moved back to their old house after apologizing to the movers. However, they seems to have resolved to sell the old house as well, and they hastily began scouting for an affordable apartment for the trio to live in. There was also a claim for damages from me, and they had to live together, so Jeff and his dad had no option but to start job hunting. But his mother had never worked before, and she had been disparaging me, so she didn't find work readily. On the contrary, she is lazing around at home claiming women don't need to work. As a consequence, Jeff and his father are seething. Although they used to be in perfect harmony, they are now living together, hurling insults at each other. When we heard such tales through Sally's friend, we agreed on how fortunate we were to escape that family. This room shelling will end once Sally's boyfriend returns from abroad, but that's when she plans to tie the knot. She turned to me. I want you to grace my wedding as my family. And I nearly teared up. I intend to continue championing her happiness while pursuing my own.